Welcome to the Staffing Playbook Podcast, your go-to resource for navigating the dynamic world of staffing and HR. I'm your host, Stephen Farrell. Join me each week as we dive deep into the strategies, insights, and stories that shape the staffing industry. From the latest trends to expert interviews and practical tips, we'll equip you with the right tools and knowledge to succeed in the staffing industry. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, the Staffing Playbook is here to help you play your best game. Let's get started.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome to episode 5 of the Staffing Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Farrell. I am joined by a special guest today, no other than the CEO of Your Employment Solutions, Reed Laws. Reed, how you doing today?
Good morning. That's quite the intro.
Yes, it's, Reed and I met in the office at 7 a.m. and started putting together our notes for the podcast. Today's topic is going to be a controversial topic, and that topic is there really a labor shortage? And before we get into the topic, Reed and I, when we were discussing what the show this morning, he recommended a book. We often read some of the same books every week, which I love. It's a lot of fun. And he said, "Hey, Steve," this was like, I don't know, Monday, "you should really read the new biography called Musk about Elon Musk." The writer was the same writer for Steve Jobs' biography. And I pull it up on Audible, and it's like 22-hour book. I'm like, wow, that's a big book. And as of this morning, Reed, I am on chapter 42. Yes, I'm like halfway through 42 chapters.
And what are you thinking?
It's an inspiring book. Every chapter, it's just like you have this aha moment, this takeaway, and then you go to the next one, you have another aha moment. He is a fascinating character.
That's probably an understatement. I'm like you, tons of aha moments, but there are sometimes I think, man, I don't know if I love or hate this guy, just his demeanor and how he reacts to certain situations. And but it is inspiring running what he's running and the size of companies and being CEO of all of them. I go home exhausted after some days doing what we do. And then the thought of what he's doing.
Running 5 different companies at the same time. Yeah, it's truly remarkable. I relate to his lack of work-life balance for most of my career. I'm sure you do as well.
Yeah.
I would say I have slept overnight at a job one time in my career. Well, no, it was twice, actually. The second one was just because we were getting the carpets cleaned and no one else would be willing to watch the guys do it.
Yeah, I think we probably all have a story like that. In the beginning stages of Yes, there were lots of nights that we stayed at the office or had to work through the night for whatever reason. So
Yeah.
But the way he does it with the number of years, I'm not comparing to that, but understandable that just, my goodness, out of this world.
Yeah. I think what this morning when I was listening to a couple chapters, where they talk about where they were launching the 3rd and 4th Falcon rocket, right, that could deploy, a satellite or equipment into space and then come back down on a pad. And, they were looking at, looked like maybe something was leaking. They couldn't tell what it was. and he just takes this. He looks at all the information coming in, and within a few seconds makes a calculated decision to go for it. And lo and behold, it was a successful launch. The last, prior 2 or 3 were not.
Mm-hmm.
And every decision that he makes, he takes all the information that comes in. He knows more about some of the components than the engineers have, that they know, and he makes very calculated decisions rather quickly. And sometimes he's wrong, and sometimes he's right.
Yeah, you just said probably the one comment that's stuck out in my mind on that book thus far is he takes a lot of risks. And his comment was, look, all the risks that I'm going to be taking, 80% of them are going to be right, and the other 20% we can deal with later. So odds are in my favor.
Yeah.
I really liked that kind of risk aversion approach.
Yeah, it's really neat. Well, if you haven't checked out the new biography on Musk, go download it on Audible or go purchase it on Amazon or your local bookstore. It is a phenomenal book, very inspiring. And I'm just halfway through it at chapter 42.
Yep, it's a compelling book.
Yeah. All right, so today's topic we mentioned is there really a labor shortage? A lot of people think, Reed, that this labor shortage is going to go away soon. Do you agree with that?
I would like to agree with that. I think that would ease everyone in the world's fears of finding workers and what does it look like in the future. But no, it's here to stay, Steve. Unfortunately, the labor shortage, as long as you and I are alive, there is no ratios that come back in our favor. It's here to stay.
Yeah, not only is it here to stay, but it looks like it's here to get worse, which, I don't know if I feel good about that, but we've got to be honest with ourselves and reality. Reed here is going to share some pretty amazing stats. I'm going to ask him several questions because at the end of the day, if there is a labor shortage, what does that look like in the near and long-term future? And then what are you going to do about it? Right. So I want to start with just like, what were the primary causes of the labor shortage? I mean, did this start during COVID? Did it start before COVID or after?
Well, Steve, maybe we can go off script here just a little bit. I think this is a good time. This started before COVID. COVID exacerbated or made it look that way. After COVID, it wasn't quite as bad as we're all seeing right now, but it started way before COVID. And we've got a chart here. Do you think it's too early to show that first chart, Steve?
No, let's go
and
ahead.
Then we'll get into some of the 4 or 5 reasons why. Yeah, let's blow that up. I can't on my side.
That's as big as it gets, Reed.
Okay, that's fine. So this goes back quite a few years, and what Steve and I did is put in these bar graphs, both vertically, and then you see this green and this blue line that we've drawn. And what you're seeing is there's this blue squiggly line that's in the orange right here, and that's our labor.
Yeah.
And in the orange there, that's the available jobs. Is that what it says?
It's the reverse. Labor supplies in the orange.
Okay,
the blue is the labor demand.
Okay, labor demand. And for years and years, you've seen that the supply has outweighed the demand. In right around 2018, that switched on us. You can see a gap. And the gap gets it widens during COVID. And then it starts to shrink a little bit after COVID. But as you put those lines in there, the gap's going to widen and get wider and wider and wider. So based on the information that we have and thrown it on a graph, you can see it's a nice visual for everybody, like this is not going away. And so causes.
Why is that?
The 2 primary causes, and then we'll get to 3 others. The first is our aging population. And so you have got a massive swath of individuals that in the next 10 years are going to retire or are hoping to retire. And the backfill is not there. That we don't have enough to backfill. And so that's one of the reasons that that gap's going to get larger. And an example might be, Steve and I were just with a aerospace company yesterday, and the data for them came back to, for every 2 jobs right now in the country, there's only 1 person
in their space.
backfill those jobs. In that space. And if you look at the average age in that space, there's going to be a real problem in 10 years from now to fill that gap. When all of those in the aerospace start to retire, the ratios are going to go a little more drastic than 2 to 1. We would expect to hit 3 to 4 to 1. And so that's just one small, although big part of the industry example of what's happening there.
Yeah, that was really compelling. Just presently in aerospace, which is a large industry, the ratio is 2 to 1, and you find that in many industries, especially the industries that have the most demand, like manufacturing. And I remember during COVID, large companies did forced early retirements. I mean, there's a better way of saying that. It was they said it probably in a nicer way, but let's just call it what it is. It was forced early retirement, and for some it was unwelcome, but for many it was welcomed if they have the pension and 401k, etc. And so that created an even larger disparity in the labor force. But there's still a lot of the significant part of the population that are indicating they're going to be retiring in the next 5 years. And I don't know if you can speak to the birth rates, but that certainly plays into the challenges not only presently, but in the future.
That's right. Steve, you were talking about COVID, and there was this story that you once told me. We couldn't find workers. You couldn't find workers in your own backyard. And so the creativity started kicking in, and you had to go out of state, rent some buses.
Yeah.
And so some of the industries, the oil and gas that really shut down maybe harder than some of the manufacturing that were allowed to stay open, you were bussing people in by the hundreds and finding hotel rooms for them just because of the lack of availability in our backyard.
That's right. Yeah. Which was, great for those individuals from another state where they were out of work, out of unemployment. But, think of the local economy that had to, that didn't have the workforce to meet those needs. So we had to pull from another state short term just to fill that gap. I think that was probably like my first real big indication that we've got a problem here.
Yeah. I would agree. Okay, you mentioned birth rates, and I'm going to read some information that talk about this birth rate. So this isn't coming from Reed. This is coming from other sources. But let's talk about the global birth rate, and what we're going to get specific. This is per 1,000 people. So in 1970, the global birth rates were about 30 to 35 births per 1,000 people.
Okay.
Or no, excuse me. Yeah, 30 to 35 births per 1,000 people. Today, the birth rate is in half globally, where it's approximately 17 to 20 births per 1,000 people. And sneaking in some of Musk's book, he often throws a jab out there saying he's helping that birth rate all by himself. So at least he's got some humor on that. I think he's got 11 kids, but he's doing his best to keep that birth rate up. So that's globally, it's cut in half. Let's go a little bit more micro and talk about the United States here. In the United States, per 1,000 people in the 1970s, the birth rates were 18 to 20 births per 1,000 people. And now, fast forwarding to today, the recent data shows that it's 11 to 12 births per 1,000 people. And so you can just see when you have an economy wrapped around the number of birth rates in the 1950s, 60s, and the examples I just showed you in the 70s, you fast forward to today, those people that were hired on back then are now retiring. And then we don't have enough people to backfill them with birth rates alone. So those are the two primary causes, and there's some other ones leading up to that, but the two largest ones that you and I constantly see is the aging population and lower birth rates.
Yeah, that's the equivalent to, the US birth rates at 1.786 births per women. So not even a full 2. I got up to 2, so you're welcome. I brought that average up.
Good job, Steve.
But that's which is great. We got 1.7 people coming into this world in the US, but that's not going to fix our problem presently, and it's certainly not going to fix our problem 20 years from now.
Nope.
I remember I think this was early last year, you had what was called the Great Resignation, which I talked about often on LinkedIn. These were millions of workers who left the workforce. And so this was actually now I remember it's 2021 and 2022 was the Great Resignation. They were seeking a better work-life balance. They were seeking higher wages. And it's just this emerging workforce does not look at work like you and I do. They want that work-life balance. Work is a means to an ends that, if it can fit into their lifestyle, right? We had Pawn on here, who's a Gen Z. She's director of IT, and we had some fun talking to her about Gen Z. But they're looking for companies that have values and a culture that have big picture. They're contributing to the community, to the world, and so on. And so you had this Great Resignation, and then you had because of COVID, a lot of people left the workforce and never came back. I've got a chart here that shows you the labor participation trends. 2019, it was just right under 69%. In 2023, it jumped up to about 69, and then it dropped down to 67.5 in 2024. And it's climbed up a little bit back to that 68%, but we just don't have the same participation rates that we had before, and it's not going to get any better unless you disagree.
No, I agree. How about this COVID thing that you're talking about? We talked about you had to bus other people in through a specific time, and people are saying, or what you and I would constantly hear is, okay, when COVID's over, it's going to go back to normal. I think to me, what COVID exposed is not going back to normal, but what the new normal is.
Yeah.
And you said this, even with Pawn, she talked about cause. That part of this Gen Z is they want a company that has a cause of some sort, and that gives them a reason to get up and get out of bed and want to work. But COVID also reshaped and created this worker expectation that maybe didn't exist before, or at least it expanded it and made more people aware that the getting up and hitting the coal mine in the morning and not complaining and going 10, 12 hours a day. And you fast forward today it's whether there's a coal mine or not, just the expectation of workers of this balance of, I don't want to do that. It's not about the money anymore. And so with this labor shortage here to stay forever, and COVID exposing that that's here forever, it's going to reshape how employers and how staffing agencies think on how to move forward and what they're going to do to keep up with demands or whatever else comes up to us in the future. I'm not sure.
Now that brings up my second question. How has the labor shortage impacted businesses, even particularly for our industry, the staffing industry? Because it has, right?
It has. The impact that it's having on us. If you go back in time, Steve, how quick could you fill a job, call it 5-10 years ago in the staffing industry? What did that look like?
Same day.
Yeah, same day, same hour in some instances.
Yeah.
If you remember the graph that you pulled up first, you had more people than labor. And so you would tell people, and I remember this too, look, if you're not going to show, I've got 10 people waiting for your position.
Yeah, so, I used to brag about, I had an office of a couple of people that filled 40 positions in one day and 160 in 1 week. Like, I think I still have that on my LinkedIn profile. Like, here's what my team did. Aren't they so great? But in hindsight, it was like, yeah, that was really hard work, but it was actually easy because we had the talent available, ready to go to work.
you had the talent, and there weren't as many roadblocks to find that talent as there is today.
Yeah.
And so there's more barriers put in place today than perhaps there was in the past to find workers. And so fast forward today, you were just talking about you could fill 40 people in one day, and then somebody might show up in the first hour within the same day. How do you feel about that stat today?
Yeah, it's harder to put a number on it because it's just, I mean, it's days. It can be weeks, just for one position. And companies are, because there's a lot of people looking for higher wages. People are looking to because of inflation, trying to make ends meet, but the demand for that labor has gone down initially, and so it's been very competitive. And companies are just forced to raise their wages to attract that new talent, but they're still falling short because there's just not enough talent out there.
Yeah, Steve, don't you find it there's a disparity going on? You've got a lack of labor, and you just said that you used to be able to find labor in 10 minutes when there was plenty of it. And you fast forward to today, there's this lack of labor, but yet it takes longer. Don't you think people would be more desperate? Like, I need it right now. I need it right now. And they can't get it because of the lack of labor, but still the hiring times take longer than they used to. So there's lack of labor, there's the desperation, yet it takes them longer to hire somebody. So it adds more pressure on the operations and ultimately the bottom line of all of our customers. And so I just find it interesting as the desperation's there, but yet they're willing to take longer to fill the positions.
Yeah, and I think that's a gap that employers need to recognize and evaluate their recruiting processes, their hiring process. I came across a fun fact that was shared with me a couple of weeks ago that, you have 10 seconds to call your ideal candidate that just applied before it drops by, 18%, and then it keeps dropping minute after minute. And so, so if you're taking weeks to hire somebody, are you really getting the best talent for your roles? If it's taking you weeks to hire somebody, or are you getting the one person that, doesn't really care and, maybe not the best talent? I don't know. But there is disparity there.
Yeah, agreed. I'll maybe throw in a few stats because we did that not too long ago. For all of our listeners, it takes, if you wait 48 hours to respond back to a candidate, you have a 17% chance to talk to them. 17. If you can put it to 24 to 48 hours, the 17 goes into the mid 20% chance to talking to them.
Wow.
And then if you go under a day, you see these massive upticks. And what you said is part of the impact on business is waiting that long. What you're really saying is, hey, competitors, whether you're in my space or not, I'm just giving you time to call this person because I'm waiting. Yeah. That's what you're waiting. That's what you're saying. And so we've got to get rid of this mindset of waiting 48, 72 hours and get in the mindset that every second matters.
And it's not the unemployed necessarily that are applying for these jobs as much as it's the underemployed. And so, this is skilled talent that will be picked up by your competitors if you're slow to respond.
Agreed. Because of this impact, when you're asking how has the labor shortage impact business, what we've done, and it's been a massive upgrade going back to speed, is you don't want speed to be confused with, I'm talking to them really fast, let's get them to work. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about speed to talk to your talent. And so what we've recognized, we try to respond in 10 seconds in one way or another. And that means we're getting to them before anybody else.
That's right.
So that's the first part of speed, that's the way it's impacted us. The second one is how do we get them into the office? So even though that I've talked to them maybe quicker than everybody else, if we don't get them into the office or whatever, I know there's some remote out there too, but if you're not getting them and talk to them, you're just giving time for your competitors to reach out to them in the meantime. So speed to you and to the job, or at least to talk to their resume or to get them in for an interview, is a shift that needs to happen to all businesses, and that's impacted us because most of us are still on this old traditional way and habitual way of doing things, and it's just not working and won't work moving forward.
Well, back to our original point, the speed isn't fixing the labor shortage because there's just a lack of people for the jobs, but it's a fix for your labor shortage, right?
Right.
Sorry for the other guys, but you're going to have your facility full. You're going to have all your positions filled if you're quick to find the right candidates, talk to them, get them on a hook, and make sure it's a competitive offer to get them through the door, and that you have a value system that matches theirs. But there's still this massive overall labor shortage that is really not going to be addressed unless our population just skyrockets overnight. But then you're still looking at 20 plus years. And so at the end of the day, if you're a company that needs labor, you just have to be competitive to get that labor, to recruit that labor over to you.
That's correct.
What do you, in your mind, based on the data, what industries are most affected by the labor shortage?
Well, I think we're all affected by it, but you've got transportation. Let's come back to that one. We've got some data points that I find interesting. So transportation, you've got some healthcare and hospitality and manufacturing. So those are the four bigs that come to mind.
Yeah. Transportation. Last time I looked, there was over 60,000 openings across the U.S. This economy does not move without truck drivers. And you have this aging demographic. Over 55% are indicating they're going to be retiring in the next 5 years, and we're seeing that every day. And there's no solution. There's no short-term or long-term fix to that. That's made it to the halls of Congress for the last decade because they've recognized this problem. Because again, our economy will not move without truck drivers. And healthcare. I mean, you recall the nurse shortage. The last 2 or 3 years, it's just been significant, and it's affected a lot of people, both the patient and the practitioners. And manufacturing, I may have this number wrong, but I think in July there was over 650,000 unfilled jobs in manufacturing. Even though there's a slow growth in that sector, it's still a lot of open jobs that are just not being filled, mainly because there's not the workforce. That participation rate, you had 10 million people that left during COVID, left a workforce that never came back. And then there's also a skill shortage. And it's posed a significant challenge in all these industries.
Yeah, the transportation, Steve. There's one stat that actually blew my mind. I've been doing this for, I'm on my 29th year, and it's rare that a stat can blow my mind, but this one did for some reason. You talked about in the transportation that there's 3 million drivers on the road right now, 3-point-something CDL truck drivers moving America right now. And you made a comment that 55% of them are set to retire. But then it's like, okay, but when? Tomorrow? 2 years from now? 5 years from now? And so we looked at the average age. And this is the part that just blew my mind. I couldn't believe that the average CDL driver on the road today is 59.
Wow.
And so do you retire at 62? Do you retire at 65? I don't know what the new number is. But certainly in the next 10 years, if 55% of the drivers are that age, you can make an assumption that some may choose to work longer, but of the 3+ million drivers, half of those are gone in under 10 years.
That's
so
terrifying.
We might be 60,000 drivers short today. What does that look like in 10 years from now? 1 million plus, 1.5 million, 2 million. So it's understandable, and you're right with this taking it to Congress. I remember working with CDL companies 15 years ago, and one of the transitions that they started to make was, how can we make all of these trucks automatic so you don't have to shift, so we can appeal to a bigger audience, so we can have less accidents, so we can appeal to a younger audience.
Yeah.
And so this has started years and years ago, but the problem's just going to get worse and worse.
Yeah, the technology still isn't there for, unmanned, automated, autonomous driving trucks. I mean, if I spent some time in Dallas, and you see these Amazon trucks that have this big, radar sensor. I forget what it's called, not LiDAR, but something else, and all these camera sensors. But the technology is still not there where you can not have a driver in there. Like, DOT requirements, you still got to have a driver in the truck, hands on the wheel. But even if that's automated, it's just that's decades from now, and who knows what will be there. Another thing I think that's been affecting the labor shortage is there's this big shift on remote work, and it's certainly, it's not specific to any generation, although the emerging generations, the millennials and the Gen Z, certainly millennials like the hybrid, Gen Z are really seeking after those remote work jobs. But it's also your stay-at-home parent that is looking for some flexibility because it's too costly to put them in daycare. And so, I'm curious if, what role has that shift played in the labor shortage in your mind?
I think it maybe ties into our COVID. It's the expectation that's been reshaped. People want the flexibility, and people want that life balance, definition that's out there right now. Does that even exist? And so just this expectation that's been reshaped. And then the previous question, you can see how it ties into what their expectations are and what reality is. On a production floor, when you're moving widgets, but you want to work remote, it doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't.
And so that's part of the shortage in finding, and the struggling for those areas is you want people to have that work-life balance. You want to be able to work across the nation, sitting in your home. But the healthcare, you've got to, I know there's some phone-related parts of it, but healthcare, manufacturing, hospitality, transportation, you physically have to be there.
You do.
And so you can see why those are some of the industries that are most affected by this, is this remote mindset, but it's just hard to put that mindset and flexibility and expectation into places that need you to push.
Yeah, you can be on a laptop in the Bahamas selling the widgets, right, remotely,
Right.
but
Right.
you can't be making the widgets in your home. It just doesn't work. I know there's job ads out there you see that are like, work from home, box candy, from Amazon from your house. Those are scams, just FYI. Hate to break it to you. Amazon's not going to have someone put candy in a box and ship it to you to then just unbox and rebox and ship it out. Just doesn't work. I apologize if you thought that would. But yeah, it certainly plays into this overall labor shortage.
And I think the second thing, Steve, is there's been a positive, right? We talked how it affected some of the industries that physically need you there, but there has been a positive too with those that are on the phones or the ones that can sell. I mean, it's been a really good geographically to help that happen, and you can see that all over the world right now. So there has been some positive impact, but it comes with its challenges as well.
Certainly, yeah. All right, well, let's talk about some more positives. How can businesses adapt to mitigate the effects of the labor shortage?
I couldn't wait for this question. A year ago, we went and grabbed our 5 largest customers, and we wanted to do a focus group on this exact question, because they are hearing the same thing, and they wanted to grab some information that we are seeing, and because they knew it was they're feeling the effects of it right now. They know the effects are going to increase in the future, and so they were trying to make shifts. And at the end of that 2-hour session, going back and forth with questions, a couple of things on adapting, and some of them were mind-blowing to me. Here was the first one. When you're looking for employees, less clicks is important. So do you remember when we were just recently talking about the speed to an applicant? But every click, if you're going to use at the palm of your hand, that's the first one. Make sure that You digitally can do everything from the palm of your hand. And if you're not there, get there as quick as possible. More and more people, 87% of people are starting to apply with the computer that's in our hand. And so you have to adapt to that if you don't have it. That's one of the adoptions that need to be made. But when you make that adoption, or if you're just using a PC, every click that you have to make moving down that application process, you are losing people every click. So make it really easy for the end user.
Yeah.
And in the past, when it swapped, people were willing to take the time and answer all the nonsense questions. And moving forward, it's, yes, you have to answer the questions, but you just have to adapt to how do you get them into the office quicker. So that was the first one. The second one pertains to, some of them were in the skilled, and we talked about how some of the skilled trades, that's going to be a challenge in the future. They are done looking at, I need 5 welders with MIG or TIG, and this is how many years, and we're going to do a bend test. And they're going away from, I need somebody with experience with welding. I want somebody who's informed coming into welding, and we will train.
Yeah.
So the recognition that some of those skilled laborers aren't there, they're just looking for the mentality side of it rather than the skilled, because there's the lack of that. So that's one of the adoptions that people need to consider, is quit looking for 2 to 3 years experience. Look for something different, because they're not out there to give you 2 to 3 experience, 2 or 3 years of years of experience.
And a lot of companies have figured this out. And so if you're one of those companies that have not figured this out, if you're still asking for someone with 2, 3, 5 years of experience, just know that your competitor down the street is not asking for that, because they've come up with a plan to develop the skills needed, right? So they can attract those people fresh out of the tech schools and train, honestly, just train them the way they want them trained, right? That fits their processes. And so they're filling that labor shortage gap. All the while you're sitting here going, why no one wants to work? Why can't I get anybody? And it's like, well, no, people want to work. You're putting these huge barriers in place for them to come work for you.
Correct.
And even back to that easy apply, the multiple clicks. I remember applying for jobs years ago, and not only do I have to spend 45 minutes filling out this application, but now I've got to take a personality assessment. Then I've got to take a skills assessment. So I'm 4 hours into an application, and I was willing to do the work back then. But nowadays people are not willing to put in even 15 minutes on an application.
Right. Yeah, you lose them. We see that every day. You lose them. You've got to leverage technology. You've got to put that speed into place. You've got to be flexible, it seems like. Those are some of the things to help mitigate. And let's talk a little bit about there's a compensation piece. You see out there, here's the wage, but with commission and bonuses, you can make up to this. And you're seeing this new generation coming in there saying, yeah, but commissions and bonuses don't pay my rent.
Yeah.
And so they're steering away from that. So compensation has shifted where you've got to offer a better salary, or at least market salary, because if you're not market, they are looking through and passing your job, even though it might be the perfect fit. It may be the perfect shift. It's even the work that they want to do, but none of that pays the bills.
No, it doesn't.
And so that competitive compensation is something we have to adapt to quickly, because they won't even go and click. They won't even look at your ad. They won't even respond if you call, if you're not at least within market. And so that would be the compensation piece. And number 2, benefits. Well, we've got these great benefits. Everybody has benefits. And by a general statement, there are companies that have amazing 100% benefits. But from a general statement, to try to sell benefits doesn't work anymore. If you don't have benefits, that's probably an adaptation that you ought to consider. Everybody has benefit. It doesn't really put you above other opportunities with benefits like it once did in the past.
No, not if your pay isn't in the competitive range for that role. The benefits really won't matter at that point.
That's right.
Yeah. The compensation is really important, especially if you have these additional incentive plans. That's great, but to your point, if you're scrolling through the job ad and you see the base pay is 10, 15, 20K less than anybody else, but there's incentives and bonuses, maybe there's a quick path to get there, but you'll never have that opportunity to share that with a candidate because they're not giving you the time of the day. Yep. All right, maybe let's move into some, looking at the low birth rates, in the future demand for the labor force. Are there some long-term solutions for this labor shortage?
No. If you're saying, is there going to be this fix that stops this labor shortage from happening? No. If anybody's interested, I know I just ruined yours and everybody else's day, but it's just no, the labor shortage is here. There's a reason automation is going crazy. We used to work with a company that needed 120 people putting widgets together, and now they have 2 because they're running just to focus to make sure the machine's running. So automation is, one of those ways people need to adapt that we were just talking about. But long-term solutions on labor shortage is the idea: if this person doesn't work, like we're an ATM, I'll just go to the ATM, punch in my number, and out spits another person that I need. That did work in the past, but it doesn't work anymore. And so, no, there's no real solution for the labor shortage. However, if you're looking inwardly at every person's business that they're running, the idea is, how do you keep them? Like those are the new buzzwords running around, is you can't find them. What are you doing to keep them?
Yeah, we're spending a lot of time with our current clients just speaking exactly to that. It's how do we keep the employees you have? We're not, that to your point, we're not a human ATM machine, and we can't just spit out a replacement every time you need somebody. It's what are we going to do differently long term to keep these people? Because there is not, the ATM is empty. You're going to get that error message when you swipe your card. Sorry, no funds. What do you do now?
Right.
You mentioned, training when it comes to your workforce, upskilling them. That's another way of keeping them, right? It's not just being competitive on the benefits and the salary, but also long-term, what are you doing to upskill your people? So they're bettering themselves, as well as contributing to your company at a greater rate. That's another thing that companies need to look at.
Yeah, Steve, you're right, and I think one thing that I'm super passionate about is, are people seen? We've all seen those, that somebody comes into work and like, oh, there's your spot, go over there and get working. There's no training, there's no care. They're like, do they even know my name? And we're seeing a big increase in taking time with them, not just on the interview process. That doesn't say anything about caring for them. They need to feel that they're cared for. They need to feel the love, if you will, from whoever you're working for. And those that do that best are going to, I think it's exponentially hold on to their employees when that happens. And so we're seeing a shift. And Steve, you've been with me with some of our customers on how to do that.
Yeah.
And it's just the little things that improve the culture. And culture will eat up processes. Culture will eat up productivity. And so you have to make sure, especially with this new generation, they need to feel that they are wanted there, and not just by a paycheck. They will leave a higher paying job for a place that they care for.
Yeah,
so very true. Somehow figure that out. There's a book out there, another one for anybody interested. It's called The Accidental Superpower. And within that book, it talks about this young population. And the fascinating thing, right in the middle of the book, it talks about the next significant rise in the global labor supply isn't expected until 2045. So we have a downward slope till 2045, and at which point we're going to see an increase. But the increase is not going to make up and put us back to the times when we had a surplus of employees. It's just an increase. There's still going to be a gap between labor supply and demand. So 2045, that is 21 years from now. And so thinking, okay, we're going to get over this. It's going to go back to what it used to be. And we hear that. And it's just not. There's no data point that suggests that's even close to happening.
So you're telling me there's still no hope. A year from now, 5 years from now, 21 years from now, there's still going to be a massive labor shortage.
That's right. Your ATM card is officially empty.
Man, you have been banned from the bank. Okay. Well, I know we're coming up at the end of the show here. It's pretty clear. You've been crystal clear with the data. This labor shortage is real. It's a problem we have to face, and it's a problem we can't solve by just simply waiting it out. But at an individual level, at a company level, you can solve it for yourself, and that's going to be making it easy for them to apply. It's going to be offering not having such a high requirement when it comes to their skill sets and their endorsements and their trainings. That you have your own training program built out so you can develop your own people. That you have an ongoing training program for your people. That you have a culture that represents the values of your workforce, where they feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, and that you help people feel seen, right? I think you and others have shared this with me in the past, that the biggest issue that's plaguing the world today is loneliness, right? And so people want to be seen, they want to be heard. And if you don't have a culture that embraces that and loves that and shares that, you're missing out. And you've got to be competitive on compensation. You've got to continue to look at your compensation, not just annually, but sometimes quarterly, sometimes even monthly. And yes, there's a real cost to that. We're all aware of that. But what's the opportunity cost if you don't respond to the market, right? You have those positions go unfilled, your product doesn't get pushed out or whatever you make or sell, and all of a sudden you are losing a lot more than what you could have made if you just upped your wages to be competitive.
And let's add one more. It's important to create a clear career path. People want to know why they're coming to work and what that means for them now and into the future. Saying, hey, we'll get you there. A clear career path and why they matter and what they're doing makes a difference. I would interject and put that in there as well.
Yeah, I love that. I've used the terminology a clear path to promotion, CPP. So you've come to me early on and like, what's your current state and what's your future state, right? What does your career look like in the future, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? And which I really appreciate because I do have goals and aspirations, and you've created that clear path for me. And any employer out there that's responsible for people, you should do the same thing. You should have those conversations of current state versus future state, and what's that clear path to go from where you're at today to where you want to go tomorrow.
Agreed.
We got a comment here from Rick. The topic is real intriguing and so fascinating. Thanks for this, guys. I'm doing recruiting and compensation analysis to help clients. Great points all around. Super great guest. Read laws. Amazing. Rick, I can offer you a complimentary wage analysis. If you want to send me a private message on LinkedIn, just send me the roles and I'll send that over to you. Thanks for the comment, Rick. Any last minute comments before we wrap up the show?
Steve, thanks for doing this every week. I think the world needs you, and I think the content that you're bringing from all different levels, walks of life, this is going to be a hot topic. Labor is going to be a hot topic for now and years to come. So thank you for putting this together every week. It's amazing.
Well, thank you for that. Well, with that, appreciate everybody tuning in. Please like, comment, and share. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Podbean and Spotify. Again, the show is called the Staffing Playbook Podcast, and a lot more very interesting, even challenging topics to come, and some entertaining ones. We'll throw in some humor there. With that, I'm going to do a shameless plug from our sponsors. We're not sponsored, but we'll end the show with a fun, entertaining message. So thanks again, Reed. Thanks for everyone for tuning in.
Thank you.
6 months ago, I get a call from Steve Farrell, who wants to talk about partnering with Yes for our labor needs. It would
change your approach to staffing.
I told him I've already used multiple agencies and have had headaches with each one. So my approach to staffing is just fine.
With multiple agencies, we thought we had our staffing needs covered.
Hey, the agency employees didn't show up, so we're short on staff again. I'm sorry.
Focus. Curses. Fetch.
Hey, an agency sent an employee.
Do you have production experience?
I've produced YouTube videos. I'm hungry. When's my first break?
This is not sustainable. If you want happy customers and a healthy business, something's gotta change. So yes, we tried Yes.